The price was not right. New fallout this hour as Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price resigns over his use of private jets on the taxpayer dime. Why someone here fears what this means for those tax cuts. Hi, everybody. I'm Dagan McDowell. This is Bulls and Bears. Tom Price, the latest in a long list of casualties. And if Scott is right, this could be very costly. Also here, the Bulls and Bears, Jonas Max Ferris and Gary B. Smith, along with Stacey Washington and Adrian Elrod. Welcome to everybody. Scott, why do you fear the fallout from this?
Isn't this too bad, Dagan? I mean, on Friday, we get the outlines of this great tax plan that was going to help out the economy, help out the middle class, help out small businesses, and create finally some deserved economic growth. And now you have the at least chance for the left and the haters on the right to come out and say, oh, my gosh. Look at all the corruption in D.C. Look at all the backlash now that has to come from this issue. And now you're going to take the official, say, focus away from what really ails this economy, which is tax reform and tax relief.
And Gary B., what about Obamacare repeal and replace? Now you're going to have to go through the confirmation process. Will this resignation jeopardize Trump's agenda?
He won't jeopardize the new agenda. I disagree with Scott on this because unlike health care, Trump is focused on the tax cuts, and here's the reason. He understands it. Never got the impression, nor did I think most of America, that he even understood or was interested in health care. I think that's done. Let's move on from Obamacare. It's sad. They ran on it, but the ship has sailed. This whole price thing is going to be yesterday's news by Monday morning because Trump understands the power of the tax cuts. He understands the economy. He understands it from a business perspective. I think he wants to get this done. The fact that he's already reached out to Democrats says he's going to be focused on it. You won't hear any more about this whole price thing in next week's news.
But, Stacey, do you worry about now every cabinet secretary gets looked at about how they might be using or abusing taxpayers' money? Do you worry that that becomes a distraction for the White House?
Well, I mean, it's a possibility, but I don't see it being the main show right now. I disagree that Obamacare is over. It's a dumpster fire. It's got to go. They're going to have to make changes to either save it or to replace it. I think the Republicans know they have to do something with it. They have the 2018 reconciliation process if they go that route in order to make something happen with health care. The tax reform is the big show right now. I think the Tom Price resignation was done in order to get his name out of the news with these illegal flights or whatever that was about. I didn't think it was enough to let him go over, but my back channel tells me the reason they let him go or let him resign is because he couldn't get health care done and they need somebody else in that spot to help get the process started again.
He certainly didn't help with the process, Adrian. And this also sends the message as Donald Trump, President Trump, as the CEO, that if you foul up on his watch, you're out of here.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you, there is nothing that taxpayers can't stand more than feeling like their taxpayer dollars are being wasted, especially by government officials for private flights when those flights were unnecessary. So I disagree with part of the panel. I actually think that this is going to be an issue that continues to mire the Trump administration. I think more cabinet secretaries, we're seeing Ryan Zinke, who's also being looked into for his private flight usage and abuse of military aircraft. So I think this is an issue that's going to continue. And I do think that Democrats, people on the left, and just citizens of America are going to continue to watch this issue because, again, there is nothing that these folks can't stand more than feeling like their hard-earned tax-paying dollars are being abused by government officials.
Jonas, does this distraction jeopardize the agenda?
No, it helps the agenda because this guy is a distraction, and how many more times is he going to bumble stuff before we fire him? I'm glad Trump gave him the "you're resigning" speech because he needed to go. He needed to go when the Obamacare fix he didn't have any ideas for that. And frankly, when he got involved in selling a worthless penny stock for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he's supposed to know healthcare and be a doctor, and he fell for a sham, essentially, he should have been gone on that. So it's time for this guy to get out of the way so things like taxes can go through, because he's only going to draw more negative attention in the press.
Yeah, but Scott, does this open the door, to your point, does it open the door for the left to start combing through everybody who works in the Trump administration as if they weren't already? already. And does that then sideline when, quite frankly, the Trump administration might need to work with Democrats to get this tax reform done?
I think it does, Dagan. It gives Democrats a chance to distance themselves and say, oh, well, yeah, you got, to Jonas's point, yeah, you took care of Tom Price after finding out that he was spending, what, $400K on these private jets in a handful of months. But why didn't you notice it earlier? Why wasn't a better policy in place? And that's really the issue here now, is the fact that going forward, tax reform has to be bipartisan. We've seen that. We don't have a full buy-in from the Republican side anyway. So to have this come up now in the midst of just getting some of the details on the tax plan, really terrible timing.
But Gary V., we can show you a list of all the people who have been shown the door or gone out of the Trump administration. And this is a man that he will get rid of you. And I think that sends a clear message. If you ran on Drain the Swamp, then he's getting rid of one alligator at a time. He's getting rid of all the snakes, and he's getting rid of the algae that's mucking up Washington.
Well, you know, Dagan, unlike almost 99% of our past presidents, Trump had no political experience. He never served in any office. So his shakeout period is a little longer. The left wants to jump on that. But the man was a businessman. He didn't know how to be a president or a senator or anything else when he took office. So I think that people are giving him a little slack as to this. Adrian was saying this Tom Price thing is going to hold over. I don't think so. I mean, he took care of it. It's up front. Of course they're under scrutiny. He's going to say, yes, I have it under control. Let's get back to an area I understand, which is tax reform. He's reached out to the left. I think the left loves that. They want to get something done, too. They don't want to look like idiots. I think this is a win-win. Yeah, Scott said maybe it's a glitch, but as I said before, it's over. It's going to be over in 24 hours.
Yeah, the people love President Trump working with Pelosi and Schumer, too, Adrian. I'll point that out. We've said it before, but 71% of people in one poll liked that short-term spending debt ceiling deal that Trump did and basically pushed Paul Ryan aside.
Yeah, look, I mean, a majority of the American people want to see Democrats and Republicans come together and work together. But again, I'll go back to my original point, which is when you have something that could have been so easily avoided, as in a cabinet secretary abusing taxpayer dollars by taking private jets to like his home in Georgia or wherever he was going. I mean, this is something that I don't think is going to go away. You have Chuck Grassley, the Oversight
It's already made the Russian stuff go away, Adrian.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, Gary.
People just want to see government work. They just want to see us working together. But I think that this is going to be a continuous issue with the Trump administration, especially when you have people like Chuck Grassley who are looking into this, a Republican who's been pretty loyal to Trump. Even the Oversight Committee was starting to look into Price's travel. So I think you're going to see this with continuous administration officials.
Well, and Stacey, Trump says, you know what? Republicans are supposed to be cheap. This is the taxpayers' money. It's not my money.
You know what? This is the way I look at it. One of my favorite slogans on my show is "Scratch a scandal, find a Democrat." They better be careful what they're wishing for, Adrian. You think this is going to last? If they keep looking and digging, they might find Democrats who are spending money improperly, because that's kind of a hallmark of their party. I think one of the best things about this whole story is that it shows President Trump doesn't put up with a lot of guff. If you mess up and he can't find a good justification for it, like any businessman, you're out the door. And Monday, we're talking about tax reform. And if the president can explain why a family like mine shouldn't trigger the alternative minimum tax, why we should keep more of our money, we should be able to save more of it, put more of it into an HSA, why we can do better things with our money than the government can, I guarantee you Price is in the rearview mirror.
Jonas, real quick, final word.
Being a Republican is about earning your right onto a corporate jet, not conning your way onto it like half of government wants to do, because they can't get it honestly like a CEO can.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, guys and gals. Cavuto on Business about 20 minutes from now. Neil, what have you got?
Hey, Dagan. Well, Democrats suddenly worried that President Trump's tax plan will increase the deficit. Funny, they really didn't seem too concerned about that under President Obama. And with Puerto Rico reeling from Maria, some are already trying to make this President Trump's Katrina, but not the governor of Puerto Rico. Weird. Find out what he told me. We'll see you at the bottom of the hour.
Thanks, Neil. We can't wait. But up here first, what are players going to be doing during the anthem tomorrow? Someone here says the answer lies in the free market today.
Live from America's news headquarters in Washington. Good Saturday morning to you. I'm Leland Vittert. There is some new fallout from the resignation of Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price. The White House now giving Chief of Staff John Kelly the authority to sign off on most air travel by top officials involving government and chartered airplanes. Price resigned yesterday amid criticism for his use of private planes for official travel. The White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney issuing those new guidelines in a memo reminding cabinet secretaries and department heads that they are public servants and that every penny they spend comes from taxpayers. However, the guidelines exempt those required to fly on government planes for security reasons, like the Secretaries of Defense and State. I'm Leland Vittert. A lot more on this at noon Eastern. In the meantime, back to Bulls and Bears.
They were standing on Thursday, but what about tomorrow? Someone here says NFL players taking a knee better hear the message from the free market. Ticket sales dropping, at least one business pulling advertising, and DirecTV reportedly offering refunds to customers offended by the protest. Stacey, at the end of the day, the NFL is a business, so will it come down to dollars and cents more than common sense?
Absolutely. Look, Dagan, we have a couple of choices here. And when I say we, I mean the American people. If you love football and you are used to watching it and you don't want politics in it, then the NFL is making a decision for you that you might not want to participate in. And in my opinion, as someone who I love the flag, I love this country, I'm not going to accuse anybody else of not loving it, but I will say when you put your politics into something like the national anthem or the folding of the flag or the viewing of the flag, that kind of puts a little bit of a nasty taste in my mouth. I'm not a huge football fan, but I can tell you, I would never attend a game where I had to put up with protests during the opening. The game is about football, and these guys have the ability to change lives in ways that other Americans can only dream of. They have their wealth total for the total NFL is like something like a small country or two. These men could, instead of taking a knee, hit the streets, start making some real news by making changes in inner cities in America, start giving back. I know they already do, but give back more. If they want to see change, they should be that change.
And Stacey, I'll point out that you're an Air Force veteran, so you have been
absolutely
right, and you've been at people's funerals. You were in the honor guard, and so you think that they ought to take their time and present a flag to the family of a fallen airman or soldier.
I can't tell you, Dagan, what it's like when you're a pallbearer and you're folding the flag and your gloves are gliding over that flag, and then you fold it up and it's in a triangle and you put it up to your breast and take it over and hand it over to a 5-year-old kid whose dad was killed overseas in the Middle East, or an elderly woman whose husband served this country and retired and then, now he's passed away. When you look into their eyes, there is no political statement there. These are Americans, they're grieving, and they're celebrating their American family members who've given their lives for the ultimate cause, which is this country.
Right. Gary B., will the free market ultimately decide if these protests fly or not with the NFL?
Dagan, it reminds me of Mike Tyson's great line. He said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. The mouth for the NFL is their pocketbook. You mentioned ticket sales. They're down 18%. Even ratings normally up at this time are mixed to down. I'll tell you what, all the owners need to see is people not coming to the stadiums, advertisers on TV pulling out, and I bet there will be a regime change, and you'll see every player with hand over heart at the anthem. That's going to change very quickly. You watch.
Adrian, ratings were down 8% last season from the year before.
Yeah, look, first of all, I'm a huge NFL fan, so I'll just make that point. But secondly, let's remember why players are kneeling in the first place. And I think this is an important message that is unfortunately getting a little bit lost in this debate that's elevating, is because they are kneeling to protest police brutality and racism. And so I do think we're getting to this point where that initial mission is getting a little, and purpose is getting a little lost in this debate. But let's also keep in mind that Donald Trump is the one who elevated this debate by calling football players a name that probably I should not repeat on television right now, and saying that they should be fired. So you had less than a dozen players kneeling before he made that statement at the Roy Moore rally in Alabama. I think it was last Friday, right? Mm-hmm. Or the Friday before that.
Right,
and then you saw over 150 players after he made that. So let's also remember Donald Trump is the one who frankly elevated this debate to this level.
With Scott, in some minds, that makes it worse because it really does turn into a political statement about a politician, about the leader of the country. And 55% of people still think, this is a Fox News poll, that kneeling during the national anthem as protest is inappropriate. That was down from 61%, but again, inappropriate.
Yeah, I agree with the poll, Dagan, and you're right. I mean, adding the political fire to the gasoline, or adding the gasoline to the political fire, it was not good. It was not good timing, as Adrian pointed out. But the reality is this. I mean, let's go back to Gary B's alliteration there, which is that, the NFL was already wobbly, and this was maybe the knockout punch with respect to the protests and things Stacey brought up about there's other ways for these players, guys, that are leaders on the field and possibly leaders off the field, to go out in the communities, go out and reach out to people affected by the social and economic issues that are out there, the racial issues that everybody's talking about, instead of do the protest that can be taken in so many different ways, mainly badly with respect to disrespecting the anthem and disrespecting the American flag.
Jonas, will the free market decide this?
It will, but for the lost people that are fans, I think you're going to gain people. Like, in my opinion, I stopped watching the NFL because they couldn't dance in the end zone for a while. And they turned that around this year. And I was excited to start watching again. And I think Muhammad Ali was popular, even though you didn't agree with his politics, because he had political opinions. And I think there's going to be gains here also with people that are interesting in sports to watch, like a McEnroe or somebody. To some people like me who don't really care about the sports that much, to be honest.
Politicization of football, thumbs down. Thanks, guys and gals. Cashing in just over an hour from now. Liz, what do you guys have coming up?
Hi, Dagan. Speeding up the economy by bringing down taxes. Republicans say their tax reform plan will do it. And someone here says JFK and Reagan can prove it. Plus, private companies coming to the rescue of Puerto Rico. Didn't hear about that? Well, you will at 11:30 Eastern. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Liz. We'll be watching. But up here first, another dragging video gone viral. This one pitting a human passenger against four-legged passengers. The pets won, but the fur is still flying.
Walking! Don't touch me! She's walking! She's walking! She's walking!
Then walk!
Southwest Airlines apologizing after video of a woman being dragged off a plane goes viral. She apparently told the flight crew that she had a life-threatening pet allergy after seeing two dogs on board the flight. When she couldn't show medical proof, let's just say things didn't go so well. The woman was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Jonas, you fly with Ramon and Charlie all the time. I'm guessing you're on the side of the doggies.
And I think I have an undiagnosed life-threatening allergy to people's babies on the plane, but I don't complain about it or make a scene, because at the end of the day, babies are allowed on a plane even when they're screaming the whole flight, unlike dogs. And I will tell you, dogs don't jump up and try to get on when their group's not called before the plane's boarded. But I will also say airlines make a lot of money off seats. It's $125 to have a dog at your feet on many airlines, each leg. So that's where they are. If you don't like it, take a train or a bus.
Leg of the flight, not leg of the dog. Stacey?
I'm just wondering when it became in vogue to refuse to obey the direct orders of flight personnel. You sign a ticket that says you agreed to follow their orders. And if she makes this announcement, it's not safe for them to keep her on the plane. It's like she's looking for a payout. I hope Southwest sticks to their guns.
Yes, Gary, yes. What do you say?
I think it's pretty straightforward. First of all, this whole emotional rescue dog thing, I think, is a little bit of a scam, to be honest with you. That said, I'm sure Jonas's dogs and your dogs are not emotional rescue dogs.
We paid our way.
That said, the airline has rules. She broke the rules. She didn't want to obey the rules. She had to be tracked off, open and shut.
Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are all in agreement here. I mean, I also think that the other thing that's bad about this is it looks really bad for Southwest Airlines to actually have local law enforcement. You know, anytime they have video of local law enforcement pulling somebody off a plane, it's bad for the airline. But I agree. I mean, if you're allergic to dogs and it's that bad, don't fly.
Or let them know in advance, Scott, you know what? No dog has ever hit me in the head with their carry-on.
Well, that's good to know, Dagan. And I think Jonas took an indirect shot at my kids earlier, so thanks a lot, man. I'll tell you what's funny, though. Have you guys noticed, though, with these videos? I know, Tier. Have you guys noticed, though? These videos are always escalated by the passenger. The cops come on because it's a last resort to get them off the plane. If they would just calm down and file a complaint with the gate agent when they get off, this is all taken care of. Everybody's peaceful on the flight.
Dog is God spelled backwards. I know that was blasphemous, but I wanted to point that out. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Stacey and Adrian especially for joining us. 3, 2, 1, blast off to Earth. Billionaire Elon Musk proposing rocket travel to get you anywhere on the planet in under 1 hour. How that could bring you out of this world. Profits. Next. Predictions. Gary B, go.
Dagan, coffee consumption and coffee prices are both going up by Smucker's SJM, who owns a lot of coffee companies, up 30% in a year.
Scott.
Good things are afoot in the Trump tax plan that benefits corporations that have all that cash overseas by XLK, the ETF that has exposure to the tech companies of 20% in a year.
Crazy genius Elon Musk got the press all hyped up about his rocket trips to China for less than 30-minute rides. I say get the fastest jet by citation, Cessna X Plus, Textron up 15%.
Neil now.
Tax reform should go through regular order. It should help the middle class, not the top 1%, and should not increase our deficit.
We on the Democratic side are pay as you go. You want a tax cut? Pay for it. We're not there to be accomplices to increasing the deficit with a bill that does not create jobs.
Wait a minute, I'm not taking sides here, but now you're worried about spending, about deficits and debt. Forgive me, but when I hear prominent Democrats lecturing anyone about deficits and things like pay-as-you-go, isn't that a lot like me telling you, you know, the all-you-can-eat buffet? Go slow. Stop it! Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavitto. And does anyone see a little bit of hypocrisy here to Charles Payne, Charlie Gasparino? We got Amy Holmes here. Back with Ben Stein and Adam Lashinsky. All right, Charles Payne, a little rich. That's what a little rich.
A little rich. Pay-as-you-go. We don't like deficits. We're against the debt. And, you know, no one takes it seriously. And, you know, of course, these are the same Democratic Party that talks about spending money like crazy as always an investment, right? So what about the idea of investing in the American public and American businesses to keep more of their money that they've earned, by the way, and then putting it into the economy? It's so disingenuous on the face of it that it's you can't take it seriously. You really can't. And, you know, the idea of regular order, that the Democrats want to play ball, we know that they're not. We know they've been obstructionists. The Republicans are going to have to figure out a way to get this through, not fumble like they've done with every effort to repeal Obamacare.
Amy, what do you think?
The one thing that Senator Schumer said that I agreed with was doing it by regular order, unlike the way they passed Obamacare when Democrats were in charge.
What would regular order be, by the way?
Well, that would be
thrown around this $3 word. Regular order.
What is
regular order. Well, that would mean that it goes through committee, and then the committee votes, and then you go to the Senate, and then the
But there's no
Senate
mystery
leader
in it, though.
puts it on the calendar, and then you have to get 60 votes to proceed.
There's no mystery in
It
it.
takes like 12 years.
The Dems aren't going to play ball.
But they're not going to play ball. But when I'm looking at the hypocrisy of the Democrats, this issue with taxes, and that if you cut taxes, you're cutting federal revenue. Democrats seem to know that when you tax something, you get less of it when they want to apply sin taxes, for example, taxes on cigarettes, taxes on soda, taxes on sugar. They know if you raise the price of something, you get less of it. So if you raise the price of work, you're going to get
taxes on sugar? Find me that SOB.
Do you remember Bloomberg?
That's a big deal, Neil.
Do you remember that? Taxes on soda, taxes on salt. But yeah, because they knew if you make something more expensive, you get less of it.
Adam, I'm sure you concur.
Yeah, no, I'm shocked that we're passing around allegations of hypocrisy in the United States Congress here. I think the really interesting thing is so far the muted voices among Republicans for increasing the deficit. But more seriously, I totally disagree that the Democrats won't play ball. I think they will play ball. The White House is going to have a problem.
Can you give me a couple of names who are? Because I haven't heard them. Maybe Donnelly in Indiana, the Democrat, but
you do have the problem solver caucus on the
Schumer,
House side with 20 Democrats who said they would be willing to work with Republicans on tax reform.
And I think Schumer is a ball player by definition. He'll come and play when the time is right. But by the way, Neil,
all right, Adam.
The Republicans,
a ball player.
The deficit hawks in the Republican Party.
A ball player, of all people.
I said,
Adam is such a. I want to say this, man. He is a good person, and he assigns the absolute best motives to clearly politicians who might have other ideas. But, you know, hope springs eternal.
Got a good heart.
You could be right, my friend. Go ahead, finish it.
Thank you, Neil. All I wanted to say is that I predict when this thing runs into its most serious trouble, it will be because of deficit hawks in the Republican Party.
Well, you might be right about that. But, Stein, the one thing that comes through, and I know you're not a big proponent that the tax cuts will create, enough revenue to pay for them. And there's very little in this plan thus far that shows, if you're a big believer in that and paying for these things, that they've come up with ideas to do just that. But is it your sense that this is going to happen regardless?
I don't think it's going to happen. I have the terrible feeling that Mr. Trump is going to get blocked at every turn by the leftists in the Democratic Party and the extreme rightists in the Republican Party. And by the way, the data is very, very clear that when you raise taxes, you get higher deficits. I mean, I beg your pardon. When you lower taxes, you get higher deficits. When Mr. Reagan, a great, great man whose face should be on Mount Rushmore, when he lowered taxes drastically, there was a big economic push. But by the end of his term, the total federal deficit had almost tripled. Not quite tripled, but it almost tripled.
Yeah, but it did create a lot of revenues, and Republicans even in power are apt to spend that money just as much as Democrats, right?
It did create a lot of revenues. You're right.
You glossed over those
details. Let's remember, he was in office for 8 years.
Yes.
For 7 of those, he proposed income tax increases, especially a huge one in 1986. So that
were they a lot lower when he left office than when he came in?
It was a lot lower.
We started with a top rate of 70%, and it was at 28%.
A lot of the loopholes that had benefited people like me were gone.
Okay.
Listen. Ben is using a little bit of sleight of hand when he's talking about the deficit being 3 times larger when he left. The deficit as a percentage of the deficit as a percentage of the economy was smaller. I mean, the economy grew tremendously under Reagan. So you have to look at it. I mean, it's like saying you got $1,000 of debt, I got $1,000 of debt, but you make $10 million and I make $200. I mean, that's the a year. That's the difference here. I'd love to make
$10 million.
But you get what I'm saying here. And that's the sleight of hand that Ben is using, and a lot of people who attack President Reagan. I will say this, though, and I agree with Ben on this. This is probably not going to get done because Charles Schumer does not play ball. That is the biggest, that is the funniest thing I've ever heard. That Charles Schumer is a ball player.
I think Republicans are banking on him not playing ball.
But there's another
and then, by the way, you know what else he is? He's a really good minority leader of the Senate. And he keeps regular order within his troops. But I bet he prevents those guys from going over.
But there is, and in fairness to Mr. Schumer, which I rarely am, in fairness to him, that there is a principled argument for him being the New York State senator.
You don't have time for principled arguments here.
So that the tax plan would get rid of the state tax deduction, which is very much against Chuck Schumer's constituents'
right.
interests.
It's against every Republican's constituency. But listen, even when you take that out of the equation, for him to play ball on a supply side,
I don't think they need it. Charles Payne, I could be very wrong. I rarely disagree with my good friend Charlie Gasparino.
No, I'm not saying
I always do.
I'm not saying they need him.
It's going to happen.
It's
going to happen, and it's going to happen by the end of the year.
I think it's going to happen, but it will be a shell of what we saw this week. It'll be tax cuts. It won't be tax reform, and we will breathe
Will taxes be lower than where they are now?
Taxes will be lower, and we'll breathe a sigh of relief because they finally got a W on the board.
But how much lower?
Not much lower. Not much lower.
That's the problem.
So you think the corporate rate will go up beyond the 20%?
I think it'll be 22.5% ultimately.
But I think what they have to do, and Amy, you can help me with this, is I think we got into this talking about how Democrats are citing, hey, you're going to make the debt a lot worse, deficit's a lot worse, a little bit rich. But I do agree as well with some of the panelists here talking about Republicans who could hold this feet to the fire on this fiscal, paying for it. Mm-hmm. Tax cuts, by definition, if you're going to make a big stink over paying for them, you might as well not offer them. That this is something that is a multi-year phenomenon. And I think it's a mistake to go down the road being very mealy-mouthed about it and very middle of the road.
I think that Republicans just politically need to do it. I agree with Charles on that.
But they're afraid. Phil Gramm, the guy who helped orchestrate the first wave with Ronald Reagan, said famously that Ronald Reagan wasn't going to play the class warfare game. He was simply going to say, everyone's going to get a tax cut, everyone deserves a tax cut, and off we go. And didn't get sidetracked on these sort of class warfare arguments. John Kennedy, back in the early 60s, was arguing with his own party over the need for tax. I know a very different environment, but he didn't let that argument get in the way of this. And when Democrats are warning him, whoa, what are you doing here?
Well, and interesting, we know from polling data over many years that Americans actually are not that sympathetic to class warfare arguments, that they are not resentful.
But I do think
of the
they
rich.
hate the rich more than they used to.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly. I mean, if you're looking at the Bernie bros and
The
that
rich
kind of
are
thing.
richer.
But generally
Yeah.
speaking, Americans
They
don't
are.
poll that they are resentful of the rich. But I think politically speaking, that Republicans do need to deliver across the board tax cuts, or at least they need
They will.
to.
They will.
They need to.
But Ben Stein, I think the biggest hurdle they face is, and this is something to Charlie's point that he's right on, that, and Chuck Schumer will pound, is this fear that they're going to look like elitists and you know, deferring to the rich and all that stuff, and that will haunt them. Phil Graham says it shouldn't. They should go full throttle, embrace it. What do you say?
Well, I fully agree that we should have the tax cuts, and I don't think we should be afraid of the class warfare argument. Something we're dropping out of the conversation here is the proposal to make state and local taxes no longer deductible. That is going to be a huge blow to people like me in states, high-tax states like California, and I think the Republicans ought to tread very carefully on that.
Listen to this. Ben Stein, worried about his own ox getting good.
No, but there are plenty of counties that went for Trump that will also be affected by getting rid of that deduction.
Yeah,
and I would say as a political matter,
you just doubled the deduction.
And here's the tactical problem that Trump has with this whole thing. He put out a blueprint, an outline. He did not negotiate much of it with Congress. This is in these committees. They're going to be fighting over that deduction, over carried interest, all this crazy stuff.
It's going to happen. Adam, your prediction?
Shell.
No, I think it won't. I think ultimately they won't get a bill this year.
It will to infinity. All right, satisfied?
Because Neil says so.
Yeah, I just say so. Just for the hell of it. Just for the hell of it. Guys, I want to thank you. In the meantime, ahead of the president's big trip to visit victims of Hurricane Maria, is the media trying to make this his Katrina? We're all over it after this.
Live from America's news headquarters in Washington. Good Saturday morning to you. I'm Leland Vittert. President Trump defending his administration's response to the devastation in Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria, and in the process casting blame on the mayor of San Juan. In a series of tweets, the president accusing her of, quote, poor leadership. The mayor had criticized Mr. Trump's efforts to get relief to the island. In the meantime, more help is on the way. 1,400 National Guard troops from multiple states are expected to arrive on the island this weekend. That brings the total number to more than 6,000 members of the U.S. military on the ground and in the air in Puerto Rico. Frustration has been growing amid a shortage of food, water, fuel, and a number of other critical supplies there in Puerto Rico. I'm Leland Vittert. We'll see you here at noon Eastern for more news. Meantime, back to Cavuto on business.
Governor, we're getting different reports from different folks. You're right there. Has the American response been satisfactory to you?
Yes, it has, Neil. And I want to clarify these 2 points that sometimes seem contradictory. Number one, we do need more aid, but the president and the administration has done everything that they can, that we've asked them to do, and we've gotten those results.
All right, so count me confused. There you have the governor of Puerto Rico pleased with the president's actions on behalf of his people to help citizens there. So why aren't some Democrats satisfied with that? And why is it dividing the country at a time we can ill afford such a thing? And why are we making a Katrina out of this? At the same time, we're focusing on NFL players and whether they stand or sit or kneel or just fall asleep or whatever. What is going on here, Amy?
I think Democrats are trying to politicize this. President
These are all
Trump,
wedge issues, right?
They're wedge issues, and they touch on race. And I think it's a way for Democrats to try to use their own dog whistle to accuse President Trump of being racist, that he is not sympathetic to the victims of the Puerto Rico hurricane. Oh, is that Ben? Not sympathetic to the hurricane because
he never does that with me.
Because
he agrees with
Puerto Rico. But I think it's interesting that Democrats keep, invoking comparisons to Katrina. Why not comparisons to the BP oil spill when President Obama didn't go down to the Gulf for days and days and days and was getting a lot of criticism from both sides of the aisle? And even the New York Times reported that the Obama administration underestimated continuously the impact of the BP oil spill. That never gets brought up.
That's an interesting point. Ben, you were saying to this that she raises a good point. I mean, these other issues, like the NFL and this, and whether the president's doing enough for Puerto Rico and all, is it meant to get the eye of other issues or what?
I think the point I was applauding when Amy was talking was that this is a dog whistle about racism. There's every possible chance the Democrats have they will try to allege that the Republicans are racist. This isn't a racist issue at all. This is an issue of how do you get aid to an island. You can't just drive a truck there. You can't just drive a car there. How do you get aid to an island that has got very poor infrastructure to start with, and now it's even worse? How do you do that? I mean, I think if the Democrats had a real plan, if they would just stop saying racism and say, look, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, I think President Trump would listen to it very carefully and faithfully.
You know, Charles, one of the points they raise is the president should have known, or his people should have known, that this was turning into the crisis it was or is. What do you think?
No, this is one for the history books. There are a lot of lessons being learned. For instance, you can get 10,000 containers of oil, food, and other things to the port, but if bridges have collapsed, you can't get it to a lot of people. So the response has been strong so far. The messaging hasn't been good initially, and I think that's where a lot of people jumped on President Trump. You know, when these things happen, people want to hear a sympathetic tone. Bill Clinton mastered that kind of thing, like, I feel your pain.
Boy, did he. Yeah.
And so there's that element that the Democrats glommed onto. But I think for all of us, there's a lesson learned here. This is a unique situation. Category 4 storm hits the island. And we know next time, perhaps we'll deploy the National Guard sooner. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to go out there and remake those bridges like they would do in a war-torn country. These are lessons being learned on the job in real time.
Well, but you wouldn't know it from the media coverage. I'm rare to pounce on my colleagues here, Charles. But one of the things I noticed is that in a press conference that they were enraged by how the president was responding to this and not giving enough attention to Puerto Rico. 2/3 of the questions that took better than 45 minutes had to do with the NFL and not Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I agree. But who brought up the NFL? I mean, it was Donald Trump who created this thing where...
Then go back to Puerto Rico if you're the media.
But,
right?
But how about if you're the president? And my one point is this, and I agree with everything that is said here. First off, it's very hard to...
How can you? Because we all have different points of view.
No, not really.
Really?
I mean, I think there's a dog whistle aspect. I think there's an aspect where, you know, we're learning from this. The governor of Puerto Rico is not some sort of right-wing Trumpkin, right? I mean, he's presumably, you know, a Democrat, and so he's not complaining about
I don't know
the
what
response.
he is to say that.
I think he is a Democrat. But there's one thing that I think presidents do, and what you mentioned that Clinton did well, and that's, you know, he taps into the emotion and he sets the agenda. Trump set the agenda last week. It was kneeling in the NFL.
Do you agree with that, Adam?